Our News from the Hill segment tonight, the head of the Environmental Protection Agency, Scott Pruitt, said he does not believe carbon dioxide is the primary cause of climate change, and he's questioned whether the EPA has the legal right to regulate CO2. Now, the mainstream media is accusing Pruitt of questioning basic facts about climate change, but it seems like they're the ones getting the science wrong here. Take a look.
No, I think that measuring with precision human activity on the climate is something very challenging to do, and there's tremendous disagreement about the degree of impact. So no, I would not agree that it's a primary contributor to the global warming that we see.
With me now, publisher of ClimateDepot.com and producer of the climate realism documentary Climate Hustle, Marc Morano. Marc, good to see you.
Thank you, Liz. Happy to be back.
It's always good to see you. Marc, Scott Pruitt, you heard him. He said carbon dioxide may not be the primary cause of climate change. Marc, is that scientifically accurate?
Absolutely. And as you know, Liz, you just recently watched Climate Hustle. That was the whole point of showing the dissenting opinion, and the scientists from around the world, former Nobel Prize winners, former United Nations scientists, all agree with Scott Pruitt. In fact, climatologist Dr. Judith Curry, who is the chair of the department at Georgia Institute of Technology, just came out and said she couldn't find a single thing to disagree with in what Scott Pruitt said. And in the film, we actually go further and say there are hundreds of factors that can determine our temperature and climate. Carbon dioxide is but one of these hundreds of factors. And the idea that we can fiddle at the margins the human effect, the human input of carbon dioxide is what we termed scientific nonsense. That's what scientists term that. So Scott Pruitt, not only is he scientifically accurate, he's politically courageous, Liz, because I can tell you right now, heads exploded in Washington. One of the first things that happened was the Sierra Club said this was irresponsible. The head of it, Michael Brune, said this is irresponsible and that Scott Pruitt should resign immediately. They were calling for his resignation.
Right. I mean, they acted like he was
challenged.
Right, that he was a proponent of a flat earth theory or something like that. But Marc, I mean, like you said, I just watched Climate Hustle. I saw this. It makes perfect sense to me. If climate scientists can't answer the question of, without climate laws that we've enacted the past, 10 years or so, how soon would the earth have become uninhabitable? They can't answer that. But without being able to answer that, how can they possibly know the degree to which we, mankind, has impacted climate change? That, to me, is the core question. But this whole controversy, the whole accusations against Scott Pruitt bring me to two questions. First of all, and you answered this a little bit, what are the causes? What do we, mankind, contribute to climate change? And why do scientists ignore all the other hundreds of factors?
Well, and the answer for you is a year, 1988. That was the year the United Nations formed their climate panel. And up until that point, just 10 years before 1988, we had scientists and CIA reports throughout the 1970s warning of man-made global cooling. Yes, before fossil fuels caused global warming, allegedly, fossil fuels caused global cooling because they created aerosols and dimmed the earth and blocked the sun. And we had scientists from NASA and other places all worried about that. Well, in 1988, Liz, everything changed. It became a political hot potato by the former NASA scientist James Hansen testifying in Congress, and also the UN being formed. And what happened, the UN climate panel being formed. And essentially, you had a group that had to lobby continuously to say global warming was a problem. If you give scientists money and say, will you study this and see if it's a problem? The odds are they're going to come back and say, we need more study. We may have found something
They're
here.
going to make it a problem.
And having the United Nations... Yes, so the United Nations turned into a lobbying organization on climate. So they'd recruit the scientists specifically. Scientists who didn't toe the line were booted or resigned. And then they went out every few years, came out with a new report. They even announced ahead of time, we're going to make it so alarming. So CO2, carbon dioxide, humans inhale oxygen, we exhale carbon dioxide, became the boogeyman. And if you disagree, you have just desecrated the high holy book here in Washington that carbon dioxide is a control knob of climate. If you disagree, you are a denier and you belong in jail, as both Bill Nye and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. believe and have said publicly.
Right, which is absolutely shocking that, I mean, even if it were anti-science, that someone would suggest that you should be in jail because of that, that really is taking us back to the Middle Ages or to the Dark Ages. But this is the part that blows my mind, and I need to repeat this because I don't understand how scientists, these people are supposed to be bright, they're supposed to be clever-minded, if they can't tell us the degree to which carbon dioxide contributes contributes to global warming. They can't tell us precisely the degree. How can they make a claim that by not doing anything to reduce carbon dioxide, we're making the Earth uninhabitable? We're about to get to the tipping point here that we're not going to be able to fix the problem and we're all going to go extinct.
They make the claim because it's lobbying. They figure they're doing a greater cause. There was actually a quote years ago by James Hansen who basically says, basically justified exaggerating the threat because we need to get people motivated. So they just sort of say whatever they need to say. In fact, we have record low tornadoes. If a tornado happens, they blame that on global warming. We have, one year we'll have record low snow or have very little snow, as in the case here in the East Coast and in the Midwest, but of course not out west this year. That's due to global warming. When we had blizzards years ago, that's due to global warming. The snowiest decade on the East Coast on record is this decade. That's due to global warming. No snow, the lack of snow. So they can just turn on a dime. It's all a campaign cause. It's all lobbying. That's the key. Interestingly enough, Bill Nye just had a debate on television, and he wouldn't answer the question of what % humans were responsible, but he did say that without human influence on the climate, the temperatures would be where they were about 1850. That was the height of the little ice age where the New York Harbor had just been frozen over. The Thames River was freezing. So the idea that humans may have made the Earth less extreme cold is actually a good one if that's the case. But
right, he couldn't answer it, frankly, because there isn't an answer scientifically. If there were, I'm completely open to it. I'm not open to I'm not close to the idea that this stuff is real. I just don't see any evidence, any proof. And I believe what they call this type of propaganda, I mean, they call it propaganda, they call it fear mongering, and really in just everyday English, they call it lying. Mark, we're out of time.